Thanks a lot. Well, first, I'm now the former CTO of Watson IoT Platform because last week I retired from IBM. And as a result, I've moved over to work for Memento Partners, who's a big consulting in the IoT space, especially industrial IoT space. So it's going to be amazing. I had not heard your presentation before, but the number of times we're going to align is it's almost scary as we go through this. Just a little bit on Memento, since it is my new gig. We do consulting around the industrial IoT space, mergers and acquisitions, just help you get your technology in order around industrial IoT, and that's all the time I'll spend on that there. All right, so IoT itself, it's interesting. I started on IoT probably 7, 8 years ago before it was called IoT. IBM had something called Smarter Planet at the time. And we went to our CEO, and we tried to get her interested in investing in the Internet of Things. And the first time we failed. And then, so we went back about a year later, and I remember in that presentation to her, I was trying to get us to include a concept called edge, because if you looked at it, cloud wasn't going to be the only answer. You needed edge to make this work. And I got overruled, and so we went forward with a cloud-based IoT strategy. I'm a firm believer that the only way IoT will ever succeed is with edge, and at edge actually will be predominant in what happens with IoT. Some gee whiz numbers. If you look at 2020, the industrial IoT is expected to be a $225 billion market. So a lot of work's going to go on there. Why is it going to happen? It's going to happen because we have to transform from where we are today to where we need to be. I jokingly say there aren't enough humans in the world to watch and to operate things in the ways we traditionally have operated them, and IoT is going to drive a big change in how that happens, generate a lot of opportunities for a lot of companies. The second bullet kind of aligns with some of the stuff you were saying earlier. Look at how much data. The volume of data generated, 600 zettabytes per year, 275 times higher than the traffic going to data centers today. I've got to figure out a different way of doing things. I'll never be able to take all of that data and send it to the data center itself. By 2030, look at the changes that will go on within manufacturing and with industrial spaces as we look at adding about $14 trillion to the economies through these changes that we make. And things like just-in-time manufacturing, fully automated process lines, things on that line will all happen. Why IoT? One of the things that I think IoT is going to drive most is the move from just operate to instantaneous optimization using observations versus assumptions. And by that, if you look at how a lot of things operate today, there's an old guy about my age that walks around and listens to things and says, yeah, it's working fine, right? And that person, like me, is changing roles and is no longer going to be there. And the person coming in to replace them won't have that same intrinsic knowledge about what's going on. And so you're going to need to move to systems, and the systems are going to need to move to where they're instrumented. And the instrumentation is not going to be simply just collecting data, but this instrumentation is going to allow us to take that data and transform it into actionable insights and actually drive actions before any problems ever occur. We're going to move from reactive to predictive to, more importantly, to avoidance. Why do I have to find out there's going to be a problem and fix it? Why doesn't the problem fix itself before it ever happens? And as we start putting more and more systems into place that are more intelligent, we're going to actually see that happen. We're going to move from just manufacturing to completely new business models. And I know this isn't a manufacturing example, but think of Uber and Lyft and other companies like that. If you look at what they did to the transportation industry, it was massive. And all they did was IoTize vehicles, right? They allow you to see where the vehicle is. They allow you to understand who the driver is, the vehicle, the location, the pricing, everything. And they just gave you information around something that was very boring industry before, but they totally revolutionized how that happened. When I look at IoT, IoT is going to revolutionize and change everything about how we operate, everything we do. I look at my home now. My wife hates it, so I will tell you up front, she's not a technology person. But I can walk into my man cave and I can go, hey, Alexa, turn on ESPN, and up fires the TV and the direct TV box and all the other things, and they all come on, and the lights come on a certain way. And, if I want to dim the lights, I just speak to it. Those are all IoT things, but they've changed how I operate my house. My house has moved from just being turn the lights on when you walk into the room to an area where it's actually intelligent and everything in there I do in there. So we'll look at the anatomy of an IoT solution. This is kind of the chart that everyone shows around IoT. Think about it, it looks the same as every kind of systems management chart we've ever shown, right? It looks like monitoring a database or monitoring a server. I got something out there, I've got a data center up here, and I have moved data from down there to up here and do some basic analytics on it, and I know that the server's running or not running, or the database is running or not running. I did systems management for several years. I see people trying to do IoT the same way they did systems management. It doesn't work that way. You're going to have, the real value of IoT is going to be in the transformations you make there. The other thing at the bottom, you see the things being at the bottom of the food chain here. The things themselves, the sensors and things like that, may be at the bottom of the food chain. But what you're going to actually see is that's going to become the power center. Because with the amount of data I'm going to have and the amount of processing I'm going to have, the latency issues and everything else, I'm going to have to move that processing closer to the edge. And so that's what we're going to see is this picture will kind of turn upside down over time. The cloud will still be important, but the cloud's what I call the mothership for the other operations that are there. When I look at edge, edge is also one of these convergence points. I assume most of you know what OT and IT convergence is, but basically it's the coming together of two very competitive organizations in most companies. The OT team were the typical mechanical people, the people that operated the physical aspects of something, whether it be a pump or a fan or pick whatever else is out there. The IT people were us in the data centers that operated the servers. We don't think they know what they're doing, and they don't think we know what we're doing in the data center, right? And what we've got to have is kind of a coming together of that, because the real value of IoT is going to be when these things converge. So I said it's IoT, not IT for things. And what I mean there is I can't simply go out and collect the pressure from a pipeline and have a human sitting there watching that pressure and go, oh gosh, the pressure's above 70 psi, I need to go take an action. First off, there's going to be too many sensors to make that happen. And second off, by the time a human reacts to that, it's probably too late anyway. And so I've got to move from this environment of just connect and collect and store to an environment of connect, collect, store, analyze, and drive actions from it. And what I see a lot of people still doing is connect, collect, and store. What do you have when you have a lot of data? It's an easy answer, a lot of data. Okay, and what I see is so many people collecting data and just storing it away and not really understanding how to use that data and why that data adds value and how to take that data and transform it into actionable insights. The real value of IoT will come only as businesses transform what they're doing. IoT is not about connecting sensors. IoT is about transformation of your business as a result of the data that you collect. Changing how you do things, moving to new business models, and just really fundamentally re-engineering the operations of your company. The other thing you'll see is that IoT will drive a move from isolated islands to better integration. A lot of people still look at IoT as singletons, right? Let me collect data from this, data from that, data from this. The value of IoT is going to be as these things come together and I understand the relationship between that data that I collect. Why does IoT need edge? Well, data is our asset. Data is what we're trying to use to determine these actionable insights. Gartner says about 90% of all data is useless after it's collected. I think that number in some cases is higher than 99% of the data is useless. Because what we do, if you kind of look at traditional models, we collect that data, we store it away, somebody goes off and analyzes it, and we go, oh, we had a failure last week. Right? Let me look and take in that data, and instead of me knowing I had a problem last week, let me understand before I have the problem and let me drive actions as a result of it. The other thing, data has a shelf life. It's like milk. You put it in the fridge, and after a week, it's spoiled. Except with data, you put it in the fridge, and after a few nanoseconds, it's spoiled in many cases. The data, while it's really good for historical purposes, is gone with regards to the value, the real value that it has, because we let it age before we acted upon it. And that may be because we've left it at the edge. It may be because we've pushed it into storage. It may be because we just didn't have the insights to go look at it. Edge will also enable time-sensitive, performance-sensitive, cost-sensitive applications to happen closer to the point of origin. Why do I need to send all the data to the cloud if I don't need to send all the data to the cloud? Let me act on it closer to the locale I've got. So Edge is going to enable efficiencies in both data movement and data processing and data storage. I didn't say it's going to eliminate the need to move data to the cloud, but it's going to change how we look at that. And in many cases, we may not have to move data to the cloud. Analytics at the edge. This is kind of a simple flow diagram, and if you'll notice, it never ends. And I think this is the other key here on IoT. IoT is going to be about continual learning. When we talk about machine intelligence, artificial intelligence, all those concepts, the value of edge is going to be in taking those concepts and continually applying them. So we started the connect piece. We connect, we collect, we analyze. We use that data to develop models. We optimize our operations based on those models. We deploy the optimized operations. We connect, we collect, and we forever drive that activity. And if you ever finish here, you're fooling yourself, because you can always better optimize where you are. So think about what we're doing. We're continually optimizing our operations around this. When I look at containers are going to change a lot of the operations. These are things like Docker and other types of operations here. Containers are going to change how we're able to deploy and how quick we're able to deploy. For a friend of mine's working in the IT space, we were talking about containers. Things that used to take days, sometimes weeks to deploy, you can now do in minutes. And the ability to be able to quickly change and quickly update and quickly drive those actions is going to be key there. Now, analytics at the edge do not replace the need for sending some data to the cloud. And think a bit about it. I want to understand what's going on in this island, that island, and understand the differences between them. So I still want to have some sharing of information between my islands that I have. But as data center moves to the cloud, as data center moves to the edge, what happens? Think about a lot of our security in the data centers today. We've built these artificial barriers around the data center, and we've got all these great methods around how you get into the data center, and only certain firewall rules and things like that to get through. What happens when I move a sensor out here, or I start putting an edge compute node out here in this room? Well, it's no longer physically isolated, right? How do I keep somebody from tampering with it? How do I know somebody doesn't take it off this wall and move it to that wall back there? And now it totally changes its meaning because it's in a different location. And so as I start moving things to the edge, I've got to think about my security in different ways than I've thought about it in the past. Gartner estimates 5.5 million things are connected daily. That's net new connections daily. Think about how we've traditionally operated in data centers. I can never survive if I do things the same way I've done them before, if I'm deploying things at the rate and pace that we're talking about here. The other key here is I talk about security by obscurity. A lot of things, especially in traditional models like manufacturing, the security for them was lack of connectivity. Right? You go into some building management systems. I remember going to one several years ago, and the operations for the building management system were down in the basement, right? An old dusty laptop sitting there. And that was the whole access. If you wanted to get access to the BMS, you had to go to the basement and log in and go to it. That was obscurity. As we start connecting those things, we connected them bidirectionally. We're bringing stuff in from the top. We're able to get access to the thing and get access from the thing. When I look at security, a lot of IoT things today, security is still somewhat of an afterthought, right? Because the focus is on getting the connectivity and getting the data in, and the ability to protect that device, whether it's to understand what that device really is, authenticate it, authorize what actions it's allowed to do. Those things are sometimes afterthoughts in a lot of these devices. All right, you heard a little bit earlier about blockchain. Blockchain is going to solve world hunger and everything else if you listen to what's going on right now. Okay? The key about blockchain enables a whole new set of connectivity models. Instead of having a hierarchical type model, I've really got a peer-oriented model. And that peer-oriented model is one where the nodes cooperate with each other, but they're basically peers to each other. So blockchain does enable a lot of new use cases for IoT, a lot of new data analysis capabilities that I couldn't do necessarily with a hierarchical model. Blockchain also gives you a trusted model without being dependent on the cloud in order to do it. But blockchain's not a nirvana. It doesn't answer all, answer all the use case problems and all the challenges of IoT. But blockchain is one of many types of models that we'll see. So I'm going to introduce something new to you guys. I've never told anybody about this before. Since I'm not IBM anymore, I get to think on my own and create wild ideas there. But how many of you know how a beehive operates? Have you looked at beehives and kind of the instinctive ways that the bees operate? And if you think about a beehive, the beehive is a very complex model of bees interacting with each other with specific roles, but they're somewhat isolated within their hive. And they've got a queen. The queen doesn't control everything, right? The workers kind of cooperate to get things operation. You've got specific roles in there, but they're cooperating. If you think about what we need with IoT, and this kind of goes back to something you were saying earlier, I need the ability to create hives. And those hives are logical functions, logical collections of nodes that I've got. And they could be blockchain-type implementations, but it's not where everything in the world is all connected. It's where I've got these hives, and their hives can be both physical or they can be logical, right? So it could be a set of nodes, it could be a set of containers, it could be a set of functions, it could be whatever I want. But there are logical groupings here. And containers themselves really play well into this whole hive concept. So hive is really kind of an aggregation of all of the different scenarios that we've talked about, but think about them being logical entities where things work well together. And finally, what about analytics? I mean, the reality of this is analytics is what's going to drive the value. And you'll see things like machine learning, where the machines will actually start thinking on their own in a sense, right? Remember that intelligence loop I talked about where I go learn, I update, I learn, I update? That really is a form of machine learning. The machines will take on a mind of their own as they start doing this. The key on all this, though, is domain-specific analytics. And this is where I see two competing groups coming along with IoT. There's the traditional data center folks, the IBMs, the Microsofts, AWS, kind of thinking about it from the data center side. But you've got a lot of smaller groups that are coming up thinking about it from the traditional IoT side. And how will those things come together as we go? So the final thing I want to talk about, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, about things like augmented reality. When I have all of this data and I have these insights, I don't want to see numbers and words. I want to see things in a way that I can understand them. I want to see things in a way that are actionable. When I look at that pump, I want to understand that pressure number in some form other than it's 72 psi. I want to see it. I want to visualize it. And this is where augmented reality is going to play really important, because as I walk around, I'll actually see the real world augmented with data that I collected with IoT, and it'll help me understand how to drive those actions from that. So with that, thank you, and I think we're going to go to the panel now.